The White House has upset news organizations after barring 5 respected news outlets from attending an off-camera briefing. And Donald Trump has accused the media of being an enemy of the people. Is he launching a war on the media? And as the Syria talks continue in Geneva, we'll be showing you the second part of my exclusive interview with China's special envoy on Syria. Welcome to The Point. I'm Liu Xin. Iran's Navy has been exercising near the strategic Strait of Hormuz, its first major exercise since the inauguration of U.S. President Donald Trump. Now, the 2-day maneuvers covered an area of over 770,000 square miles in the Sea of Oman and the Indian Ocean near the strait. Nearly a third of all oil traded by sea passes through this strait, and it has been the scene of previous confrontations between the U.S. and Iran. But this drill did not involve Iran's elite Revolutionary Guard, a paramilitary force the U.S. Navy often criticizes for harassing its vessels. Iran's Navy routinely holds war games it says are aimed at improving its readiness against threats. It also sends its warships to international waters off the Gulf of Aden to fight piracy. The naval exercises were being staged at a time when tensions with the U.S. escalated after Trump pledged to get tough with Iran following its ballistic missile test on January the 29th. Iran now appears to be sending a message to the Trump administration and regional powers that it will not alter the core pillars of its foreign and regional policy. Tehran is also sending a signal that it holds power over the Strait of Hormuz. Thankfully, at least this latest exercise seems to have been held without any serious diplomatic incidents taking place. French President François Hollande fired back at Donald Trump on Saturday after the U.S. president said that a friend of his thought Paris is no longer Paris after attacks by Islamist militants, and that his friend no longer wanted to take his family there. Now, in return, Hollande said Trump should show support for U.S. allies, adding, "I won't make comparisons, but here people don't have access to guns. Here you don't have people with guns opening fire on the crowd simply for the satisfaction of causing drama and tragedy." Hollande also said he would invite Donald Trump to Disneyland in Paris. He says, "I may send a special ticket so that he at least comes to Euro Disney and understand what France is," he mockingly added. Now, a week earlier, Trump got his facts in a muddle when tweeting about immigrant violence in Sweden. So it will be interesting to see which will be the next of America's allies that he can openly criticize. Seriously, does Donald Trump really think that this is the best way to treat one's friends? As the old saying goes, who needs enemies when you have friends like this?
Wild elephant numbers are falling globally, but the number in China is on the rise. How come? And why are people dying as a result? We go to Yunnan to find out.
老百姓对大象的保护、对野生动物的保护这个意识提高以后呢，猎杀大象、卖内象牙这几年都很少。
Last Friday, the White House barred 5 news outlets, including CNN and the New York Times, from attending an off-camera press briefing, igniting a new round of fire between the Trump administration and the media. Sooner afterwards, Donald Trump continued to attack the media, calling them the enemy of the people and a great danger to the country. Also, he announced that he would not attend the White House Correspondents Association dinner this year. If so, he will become the first American absent from around the dinner in 30 years. By doing so, is Donald Trump intensifying the war with the media? Why is he getting himself into so many troubles? And where would this war lead to? For more insights, I'm joined by Stephen Jaggi, Associate Professor of Law at the Peking University School of Transnational Law. Stephen, thank you very much for joining me. Now, so we see Donald Trump started a new war with the media by blocking CNN and New York Times and 5 other media outlets from press briefing. Some say the White House violate the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, but truth is only the Congress is addressed in the text, which, as I read here, now Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. So, Stephen, is the White House violating the Constitution or not? Is the President of the United States confined by the First Amendment?
Well, first of all, Xin, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here with you tonight. This is a very important question that you're asking, and I think the answer to that depends very much on the facts of the case. First of all, you're absolutely right. The text of the First Amendment only refers to Congress. Congress shall not make a law abridging the freedom of speech and of the press. However, it is very generally accepted that the First Amendment does not only apply to Congress, but to every actor of government, and as such also, obviously, to the President of the United States. So, in my opinion, there's no doubt that Donald Trump, as President of the United States, is bound by the First Amendment. The big question is his exclusion of specific journalists from the press meaning a violation of the First Amendment? I think that is much less clear, and it very much depends on the facts of the case. If Donald Trump has excluded these journalists because of a specific content of reporting that they had done in the days before this event, then I think there would be a strong argument in favor of the President having violated the First Amendment, because regulation or government interference with speech that is based on content, on the content of the speech, and that is aiming on limiting this content, is only constitutional if it fulfills the requirements of the strict scrutiny test, meaning that a compelling government interest has to be pursued, and the measure has to be necessary in order to achieve this compelling government interest. I don't see that these requirements are being fulfilled in the following, in the present case here. So
sure, Stephen, let me ask you this. Why do you think Donald Trump has barred these particular media outlets? Is it because of the critical articles they have put out against him? Can we conclude that he is barring them because he cannot tolerate the opinion of these people against him?
Well, I think that is the critical question of the facts in this case. If you listen to Jean Spicer, the press secretary of the White House, he argues that this was not a regular press conference to which journalists are usually all invited, all accredited journalists to the White House. This was, according to his statement, what they call a gaggle, which is a much more informal in conversation between journalists and the White House press secretary, usually in the press secretary's office. And it is absolutely usual that to these smaller settings, not all journalists are being invited, and the journalists who are invited then later share the information with journalists who have not been invited, or this information will even be put onto the website of the White House. So the purpose of not inviting all journalists to such an event is to preserve the more intimate and more personal atmosphere of a conversation in a smaller route. And if that would be the reason for excluding these journalists, that would obviously be not a violation of the First Amendment. So I think the First Amendment question very much depends on what exactly went on here. Were the journalists being excluded because of the content of their report, or were the journalists only being excluded because of the special character of the meeting that was taking place here?
Well, I think it is pretty clear he didn't like some of the media that was excluded from this gaggle. For instance, he openly called the CNN fake news repeatedly during several press conferences. This, I think, in many people's eyes can be interpreted as a kind of intolerance toward a different voice. And as he tries to make America great again, it is very difficult for people to see how he plans to do that if he doesn't show the kind of tolerance towards critical media.
Well, that is absolutely true. I think one very interesting question would be, have these gaggles taken place before, and were, for example, journalists by the New York Times and CNN usually invited to these gaggles? Because if that would have been the case, obviously the question now is, why are they excluded? I mean, I think you are rightfully referring to a bigger issue that's in the background here, and that is obviously the very critical reports in the New York Times on alleged contacts between people of the Trump campaign and the Russian government prior to Donald Trump's being elected president of the United States. This is obviously the main topic, the elephant in the room that's in the background here. And one may well guess that the Trump administration, with their current behavior, is trying to detract from this real topic that's lingering in the background.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Thank you very much, Stefan, for joining us today. You have been watching The Point. We'll take a short break and I'll be back right after this. Apart from his relationship with the media, Donald Trump has also received a backlash from Hollywood. Given the deep rift between Donald Trump and Hollywood, it came as no surprise that Hollywood's biggest night turned political. Many of this year's Academy Award nominees wore blue ribbons in support of the American Civil Liberties Union, which has fought against Trump's attempted travel ban. Many other celebrities also used Hollywood's award season as a platform to oppose the president. And here in the studio is Mr. Rowan Callick from the Australian. Mr. Callick, thank you for joining me today.
Hi.
Yes, how do you look at the phenomenon that a movie award ceremony has become so political? Is that normal?
I don't think it is normal, but Western cultural elites do tend to be on the left, and they were shocked by the Trump election, I think, and they're trying to appeal to their audience, to a mass audience above or around the president. He, of course, is not, he's an elite himself, a billionaire, must be. Mm-hmm. So each of them are trying to pretend or to claim that they're of the people and trying to connect with those people with their argument. There's a bit of a history in Hollywood's case, of course. 65 years ago, American Senator Joe McCarthy led a campaign, a witch hunt against people inside the film industry. People haven't forgotten that.
Sure. What about Australia experience? I mean, we're watching this very dramatic scene spat between the US president and the US press. From an Australian perspective, have you had any similar experience in your political history?
We haven't had anything really like this. I would have to say that two recent Conservative Prime Ministers, John Howard and Tony Abbott, did suffer quite a lot of criticism from the media, but they persisted, and they felt that they could appeal to people talking on talkback radio and so on, just as President Trump feels he can appeal through the internet, through Twitter, talking directly to people. This is what makes it different. He feels he doesn't have to rely on mainstream media, get in touch with people. But there's a big issue at stake here, which is, does the truth matter? You know, Trump was asked about, for example, he claimed 3 million aliens voted in the election. And his answer was, many people agree with me. So it seems if you shout louder or longer, or you have more Twitter followers, you're believed. So I think the question of what is true is really important for media, but we've been seduced into being ourselves too excited by opinions. And of course, Trump himself is exciting.
Yeah, right now
we're talking about him.
Yeah, and right now, sure, and the media is like, they have to attack him because he attacks the media, and there is a kind of a kids throwing mud at each other back and forth. But exactly why is this happening in the United States at this moment? What went wrong? What is the problem with that system? Well, people are looking for information, but I think and it's important people get access to information. We were hearing before about whether the president can withhold information. I don't think there's a question of that yet, because he doesn't own it. It's the governments and the people of the US information. But I think the question of opinions looming very large, and people are, as you say, shouting each other, and there's a feeling that that the ordinary people, this is the Trump line, the ordinary people are being robbed by an elite getting in the way. And well, we journalists, I think, need to get back to the facts and to focus on that, and that's the only answer. Is it true? The truth will out ultimately, I believe, even if it comes from anonymous sources. Thank you very much, Rowan Kelly from The Australian, for joining us. Now, while the Trump has clearly been saying a number of incoherent things at times, the blame is not all one-sided. Many news outlets regard it as open season on Donald Trump and have gone to extremes in criticizing him. But this is hardly the way to make America great again. A better way forward would be reconciliation, where Trump would be more tolerant of a free press, while the media show tolerance for a president who appears to be doing most things in a way totally at odds with his predecessor. Ultimately, it is reconciliation that will unite this country and make America great again, if the situation is even retrievable at this late stage. Last Friday, I had an exclusive interview with Ambassador Xie Xiaoyan, the Chinese government's special envoy on Syria, who was in Geneva to participate in the latest round on the Syrian peace talks. He shared with us his expectations, albeit that a breakthrough was not imminent. Since then, suicide bombings have killed at least 50 people in 2 security headquarters in Syria's central province of Homs. So what, if anything, can the international community do to reduce tensions in Syria? What role will the 3 powers, Russia, Turkey and Iran, play? And is the US position on Syria relevant anymore? Let's watch the second part of my interview with Ambassador Xie.
We've always maintained the position that the future of President Assad should be and must be and can only be decided by the people of Syria inside the country. It is up for the Syrian people to decide their own future, the future of their country, and also the future of the next government through elections, democratic elections. I think it's not for outside forces to impose a solution on this. After all, history and many events have proven that an imposition of any solution by outside is not workable. Just look at the situation in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Libya, whether that the country in question is stable, has peace, and has the economy growing? No, not. So I think in the final analysis, it can only be the people themselves of Syria who can decide their own future.
There's also the question of the humanitarian assistance or the kind of aid that China provide to the Syrian people. Now, some Western media has accused China of not doing enough, for instance, in helping the refugees. What is your reaction to this kind of accusation?
We've been trying our best within our command and our capacity to provide humanitarian relief work. And so far, we have provided humanitarian assistance in the amount of 480 million RMB, including cash, food, shelter, medical equipment, medicine. Remember, you have to remember that China is still a developing country. Per capita terms, China's economy, our per capita GDP still ranks about 80th place or something. But even having said that, China has been trying its best to provide humanitarian assistance. Just recently, Chinese President Xi Jinping announced China will provide another 200 million RMB for the relief work for the refugees in Syria. We'll continue to do so as China is as I said, China is a responsible country, big country that we are. We ought to fulfill our international responsibilities, but that should be done in accordance with our capacity within our command.
Let me also ask you this question. Now, some Western media reports have said that China has a stake in resolving the Syrian crisis because there are some 5,000 radicalized fighters that are fighting in Syria that have originated from the western regions of China. Is that the reason that China has increased its involvement in resolving the Syrian crisis? Or one of the reasons?
This is one of the reasons that China is actively participating in the in trying to find a solution for the Syrian crisis, because some of the terrorists are indeed from China. But I would also like to say this, that the fight against terrorism is everybody's responsibility, because terrorism is the common enemy of the world. Just look at the horrible attacks on civilians in Paris, in London, in Berlin, in Europe, in Ankara, in other places in the Middle East, in Africa, in Asia. These terrorist attacks need to be stopped, and the terrorists need to be dealt with, need to be defeated. It is the responsibility of every country in the world. It is the responsibility of the international community. And China can only contribute to the joint efforts of the world, of the international community.
Special Envoy Xi, let me ask you this question on the new mechanism we have seen emerging in the international effort to try to resolve the Syrian crisis. We know that Russia, Turkey and Iran, three regional powers, announced in Astana, Kazakhstan, that they would create a trilateral mechanism to observe and ensure full compliance with the ceasefire, which has been in place since last December. Now, you visited Turkey and Russia in January and just left Iran a few days ago. How do you view the feasibility of this cooperation, given that the three don't support the same final outcome for Syria?
First, I think it's an added assurance for the true and real implementation of the cessation of hostility agreement. With this mechanism in place, it is I think that the agreement has a much better chance of surviving, not like the previous two. And I think it is, as you rightly put it, it's the joint effort by three countries, Russia, Turkey and Iran. Let's give credit where credit is due. such mechanism does have some positive effect on the ceasefire agreement implementation. It is conducive. So let's give support. But having said that, I think the three countries alone cannot resolve all the problems, even in monitoring the ceasefire agreement. I would say this, that if I remember correctly, these countries have expressed the desire to include other international players into the mechanism. And I think this is a welcoming piece of news, because I would like to see some neutral countries joining the mechanism, so to add more authority, impartiality, and effectiveness of this monitoring system.
Of all the countries getting involved with the conflict in Syria, China is probably the only one that doesn't have a vested interest in the final outcome of any settlement. It is also the only country of the UN Security Council members that is not involved with airstrikes against Syria. As such, it is in the unique position of being an honest broker that can help bridge the differences between the various factions and help bring the warring parties together. In a world beset by proxy wars, an ambassador of goodwill is surely needed as never before. That's it for this edition of The Point. As usual, follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with LX, and you can watch previous editions on CGTN's YouTube page. Click on the playlist and look for The Point with Liu Xin.